And at the time, I didn't realize what a great experience it was. But she says, "I'm going to have you go over and meet." I don't remember who the gentleman's name right now, but he was pretty high up. I mean, he might have been in the position I'm in now. I don't know if he was the vice president for student affairs or the provost, but he was at New York University at NYU. And again, so I went over and I didn't know what, and I go into this plush office, much nicer than mine. So he must have been a provost rather than vice president. But I remember being somewhat intimidated, and he made me very relaxed. He says, you know, Miss Kaplan told me what a great student you are. I looked at your transcript; it's wonderful. And so, what do you want to major in? I was like, I don't know. So I just said business, because I thought, okay, business, I'll make a lot of money, right? And so I did. I mean, so I commuted. I grew up in Newark, New Jersey, and then I commuted over to Manhattan to go to NYU, which was probably part of the reason I wasn't focused, but I wasn't ready. I clearly wasn't ready. And so I just registered for some classes. And I remember the class I hated the most was economics. And I don't know why. Maybe it was I just hadn't focused yet. But anyway, during that time, so I was only at NYU for a year. And during that time, I actually got into children's theater a little bit, but knew I didn't want to major in that. It was almost more a distraction, not to focus on my academic work. But then after that, I pretty much, I don't know if I flunked out, but I certainly didn't do well. So for a little while, I worked for an insurance company. And I don't even remember what the work was. I think I was an insurance clerk or something like that. And the only thing great that I remember about that was the Danish truck that used to come by during breaks. But I knew I didn't want to do that either. And so I went back and talked to, not an advisor in high school, but interesting enough, it was the director of the chorus, and Mr. Martin. And he again said, "Oh no, you need to be in school." And so he connected me with Knoxville College in Knoxville, Tennessee. I never heard of Knoxville College and hadn't really no reference to Knoxville, Tennessee at all. Anyway, long story short, I ended up going to Knoxville College and was able to graduate in 3 years, so I didn't lose any time. But I was really focused then, so I don't know if I was just ready, or maybe having had that experience working, realized that that's not what I wanted to do. But so I went to Knoxville College and graduated in 3 years with a 4.0 GPA.
That's awesome. But I wanted to circle back to what you said before about not being ready for college. You said you clearly weren't ready. So what would it take? What would it have taken for you to be ready for college?
Maybe if I don't know, it wasn't something. My parents were great parents, but they weren't educated. Because my mom graduated from high school. We actually graduated from the same high school. But my dad, who's one of the most intelligent people that I've ever met, but he never finished high school. I mean, he went through grade school and then had to work to help his family out. And so there was no, and they were very very proud of me, very supportive of me, and I always enjoyed learning. But there was really no conversation about college, what happens after high school. So I think that would have made a difference. And also, like I said, I didn't get any direct guidance in high school about college. And so it just was not in my frame of reference. So, but to answer your question, what would have made the difference? Maybe if that was kind of part of my, growing up, and that was an expectation. And then also maybe if I had been more, and I don't want to blame anybody, but maybe if I had been had more conversations and guidance in high school about college. That came, as I said, at the end, but not during the time that I was in high school.
So do you think there's like a lack of information for high school students to get into college? Like, do you think that's still a thing, or?
It's hard. That's what I'm saying. It's hard for me to look back now and know for sure. I want to believe that now. Again, that's one of the areas that I'm responsible for. I want to believe that we are providing that information and that we are like in the high schools. Of course, this year has been very challenging, with the pandemic. but you know, we are very active in the high schools, and we engage with the, not only with the students, but with the high school counselors as well. Can there be, of course, there could be more. I think the other thing that gets students motivated and engaged is actually being on a college campus. And so I believe in early outreach. I don't think you can start too early to, you know, to start to have, you know, students in elementary school come on campus to feel comfortable and kind of say, yeah, this is something I can do. And I think role models help as well. That's why I'm very happy to do this interview, to say that, you know, I grew up in the projects, 73, 77, 17th Avenue, apartment 9D. And without education, I certainly wouldn't be sitting here today. So I'm very passionate about the power of education.
So you did mention your family. What kind of support did they give you? Like, was it like just emotional support? Was it financial support? And did that play like a huge part in like how you became a college student? Or
Are you talking about now, Karen, while I was in high school, or after, while I was in college, or both?
yeah, when you're in college, yeah.
Oh yeah, so I would say in college, a lot of emotional support. They were my champions all the way through. We didn't have a lot of money. I mean, it was interesting. I mean, um, we were poor. I mean, I didn't know I was poor until I left home, right? I thought, you know, but my dad and mom both worked, and so I got some, you know, I got some scholarships, and I got some financial aid. I worked all the time that I was in college. Sometimes I had 3 jobs, but so they didn't have the financial support to help me. I mean, you know, every once in a while, if I ran short, I could go to them and say, you know, hey, I need a few dollars. But I really felt that I needed to try to be independent and do it on my own. So that's why I worked a lot. And I had scholarships, but I didn't, I mentioned that to say that they both worked because I got some financial aid, but not enough financial aid to cover all of my costs. And so that's, you know, but with my scholarships then and working, I was able to take care of my financial. Now I did have loans when I graduated. You know, I'm a strong believer that, you know, to try to keep students indebtedness as low as possible. But I was also say that if you need to borrow to be able to go to school, then I say not, you should do that, because I think it's an investment and worth, you know, having to pay it back later. It took me several years. I was married for 10, 15 years before our loans were paid off.
That's crazy. Um, so I wanted to talk about like things that shocked you about college, like this, like despite everything, like what were the things that were just like, this is really different from high school. This is really different from like how I grew up and stuff like that. Like, yeah.
Well, I'll go back to my experience at NYU. Again, it was very different, and I think students can be successful. Of course, commuting. Many of our students commute to school, but I think that I never felt connected um, to to the university, and I think had I lived in a village, you know, it was in Greenwich Village is where the campus is located. Had I lived on campus and became part of that environment and community, I may have maybe have done better at NYU. But when I went to Knoxville College, I tell you that was the greatest experience, one of the greatest experiences of my life. I mean, it changed my whole focus. It's a unfortunately it's closed now, but it's a HBCU, historically black college and university. Unfortunately, like so many of our HBCUs not been able to sustain. But it was a turning point in my life. It was you know, being around other people who look like me, and being able to, you know, I lived in the first year. Actually, I lived in the residence halls for the first year, and then I lived off campus 2 years after that. But I was still very connected to the university. I think what surprised me again, and also being in the South, was in Knoxville, Tennessee. So that was a different experience for me, and that was an adjustment. And it was interesting because I, and most of the students there were students from other regions in the country, but the majority of the students at Knoxville College were from the South. And so when I came, there was this stereotype that here's this person coming from the north, and I remember thinking that I was a Black Panther. I did have a big fro, but I was not a Black Panther. But that stereotype, oh, because you're from the north, you did. So that was that was an interesting adjustment for me. But it was a great experience. I mean, I made some really good friends, and I look back now sometimes on those days and say, you know, what a great experience it had been for me, and really changed my life.
I do want to talk more about like your protesting and your activism throughout college. That when you told me about it, I thought it was really interesting. So do you mind
Yeah,
like sharing?
so I'm dating myself here. So you know, I graduated from high school in 1968, and so when I graduated from college in 1972. So I was in that period with a very um, volatile time, and yeah, you know, like I said, big fro and big hoop earrings. I guess that's why they thought I was a Black Panther, but so certainly not. But not that I didn't believe in some of the ideology, not all of it, but some of the ideologies of the Black Panther at the time. But yeah, we took over. I took over not me alone, but we took over the administration building, and I remember sitting out in front of the president's office. But yeah, it was exciting. You know, it was just good to have a cause. So
You also mentioned to me, I'm not sure if you want to talk about this, but your encounters with the KKK.
yeah, so yeah, I inferred earlier about going to the South. So the first year I was there, and I don't want to just say it's the South either, but let me first give you that experience. When I first went there to Knoxville, so it would have been like in August or whatever. So I don't know if maybe it was the Labor Day holiday, but when I went downtown with some newly made friends um, to the parade. So I'm assuming it was like maybe the Labor Day parade. I don't know, but part of the parade were Klansmen with their hoods and their, you know, or their white, like as close as I could touch them almost. And that was an imprint that stayed in my head still to this day. You know, it's one thing to see them on TV or to see them in a movie, but when you're like right up close and personal and people like, oh, this is okay, you know. So yeah, again, that affected me. And I think that might have been, I don't want to say that I was not racially conscious before that, because I think I was, but even more so after that experience. And again, I wanted to say too, Karen, that I don't want to say just that's just a Southern thing, because when I later on when I went to Ohio University as an administrator, I got my PhD at Ohio as well, but I went there to work, and there were Klansmen in Appalachia, Ohio. So I don't want to say that it's just a Southern thing, but that was my first exposure up close and personal.
I do want to ask you about seeing overt racism back then versus seeing racism that's kind of hidden now. Like, do you think much has changed how racist people are in higher education, or is it like the same?
You know, I think I think right now that it's probably more open race than it had been maybe a few years ago. It may have been hidden a little bit, but I can't remember who it was so exactly. I don't know if it was I don't know if it was Stokely Carmichael, so don't quote me on who it was, but I remember whoever it was, and it resonated with me. Again, I guess because of my experience in both the North and the South. And he said, "There's no North; it's just up South." And his point was that racism is everywhere, and that it's you know, it may be more overt in some places than in others. But to your question, I would think that it's probably more overt now than it may have been, you know, a few years ago. Again, and I think that varies, you know, regionally too. But there's been so many, you know, incidents of violence, particularly on people of color right now. So it's a sad time. Like I said, I don't think that, I think it was there before. I just think that it's more open and overt now. People feel more comfortable, I think, in general, expressing it more openly.
You did also mention to me about navigating racism, like in the professional world. Can you explain like a little bit more about how you do that, or like your encounters, stuff like that?
Yeah, and racism doesn't end when you become a professional, right? It just it manifests itself sometimes in in different ways, and so what I've learned over my professional career is that to try, when I'm dealing with individuals, colleagues, or other professionals, when there's issues, to try to assess, is it because the individual is treating me this way because I'm African American, is it because I'm a female, or is it just kind of a equal opportunity, treat everybody fair kind of thing? I use a different word, but I'm being careful because we're on we're live right now. But so I've tried, but yes, it definitely it exists, and I think both being African American and being female, you know, juggling with those two. And sometimes it's not overt, but you can feel it. And then other times it's a little bit more overt. An experience I had at University of Tennessee. So after I finished Knoxville College, graduated, I worked at another small college in Morristown, Tennessee, but then continued my education and got my master's, and also worked at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And I remember, and I worked in financial aid. I always say I grew up professionally in financial aid, but I remember having this telephone conversation with a person. I don't even remember now what area he was in, but we had a telephone relation. He might have been in housing. I don't remember, but clearly he didn't know that I was Black, because, or where I was from, because when he would refer to things, he would say those Yankees or whatever. And then I remember it was maybe several months, may have been a year, when he finally met me in person. You could tell he was like, oh. So, and then also I think there have been times, when I was younger, when I maybe felt like I wasn't being heard, or my voice wasn't heard. But I learned to deal with that better. Does it still exist? Probably some, but I've learned to navigate that. But I don't want anyone to think that, once you get to a certain level, that it ends. In fact, in some situations, it can be worse. And you have to just learn how to navigate and how to deal with it. And that's how I try when I talk with students as well. And not to always assume, if there's a conflict or an issue, automatically that it's because of race, or it's because of gender. I mean, it may be, but it may not be either.
I do want to touch on what you said about being Black and also being female. Does you being Black, female, and a first generation student, like, how was that experience combined as a college student? Like, did it make things harder? Did you gain a new perspective? Or, yeah, that's my question.
I'm thinking about what you're saying. So when I was at Knoxville College, which again, I mean, there were a couple of white students there, but it was, predominantly Black. And so the issue there, as I said, I think it was more um, where I was from. That I was a Northerner than, being female or being Black. And then probably when I went to the University of Tennessee, which is a predominantly white campus at the time. I think there certainly more people of color, ethnic backgrounds now, but it was still pretty pretty conservative. And so I never felt I would not say I was in a hostile work environment, but I would say there were times that I felt that I was being treated, or a reaction was because of my color. Uh, I think probably more my color than my gender. But I tell you where it sort of also kind of manifested itself when I was at Ohio University. So I was at University of Tennessee. And like I said, that's where my professional career started in financial aid. So but when I left University of Tennessee, I was an associate director, but I reached a point where I thought, okay, I'm ready to be, I wanted to move up. And I tell young professionals all the time, if you can't, and you know, kind of when you're ready, kind of that, at least you feel you're ready. Other people might not feel you're ready, but kind of that fire in your gut, like, yeah, I'm ready to do something else. And so started looking for, other opportunities. So I ended up going to Ohio University, um, and I was as director of financial aid. I didn't have that opportunity. The pipeline just wasn't there for me to move up at University of Tennessee, and so started looking other places. And I think I shared with you earlier, I did everything that career services would tell you not to do. And I just did a shotgun approach, and then he just went through the Chronicle and looked whatever, anything that said financial aid, I applied for it, right? Because I was ready to do something else. And in fact, when they called me for an interview, I didn't even remember that I had applied at Ohio University. Anyway, I ended up going there, and it was a great experience. But to your point, though, I could remember sometimes because working with financial issues is sensitive anyway. Um, and so I could remember a few times, more than once, and I was young. So I think at the time, because I was just, when I was became director of financial aid at Ohio University, I was just 29. And so I was dealing with that too. And most of my staff were much older, and also there were maybe a few people of color, but most of the staff was white. So I had to adjust to all of that, and it took a little while, but I was able to adjust, and that worked out fine. But I remember sometimes working with families, particularly white families, and when they got to me, it was maybe because there had been an issue. So not always, but usually by the time I got to the director, it was some issue, maybe not a complaint, but some complexity where they needed to talk at a high level. And I can remember a few times when I'd open the door and the white family would see me, be like, "Oh my goodness!" They weren't expecting a person of color. So I think it was more my color than my than my gender. But anyway, I learned to, like, try to make people feel comfortable. And I'm not even saying, I don't want to imply that I'm saying that that's racist. I'm just saying that I just think that was that they was not expecting it. I remember another time I had a colleague, actually, she reported to me. Her name was Betty Dodge, and she was a counselor in the financial aid office. And so she had invited me over. So we became not real good personal friends, but good colleagues. So she invited me over to play bridge or something. I didn't play bridge, but I didn't know how to play bridge. But she invited me over to play bridge with her friends. I'm more of a bid whist kind of person, but anyway. And so I said, "Oh, yeah, okay, I'll go." And I remember one of her friends saying, "Oh, Betty didn't tell me you were Black." And Betty said, "Why did I need to tell you that?" And I don't think it was a racist comment. The point was, because Betty said, "This is a friend of mine," and she didn't even think that she needed to tell her friends that she's Black. So I remember that very well too. So I said, "Yep, I'm Black."
That's funny. Um, I do want to speak about the support we have for Black first generation students and non-Black people of color who are first generation students. How do we foster an environment where they can properly thrive in universities?
First of all, I would like to commend the intersection um, for the focus. So to Dr. Barlow and to Dr. Marrero Lopez for all of the great work that the intersection is doing, not just with first generation students, but particularly that's the conversation that we're talking about now, because I think that's the kind of support that first generation students need to see that, yeah, you can make it, and to see other people who look like them, who've been able to go to college and be successful, and then also to kind of providing any kind of support they might need. Sometimes it might be needing some direction on how to navigate, but sometimes it might be just wanting to talk to somebody about a particular issue, or having wanting to go to like a safe space. So I think though that might sound trivial, but I think that kind of support and knowing really that people care about them and care and that will be there for them, when they have problems and concerns.
I do want to also give my, like I want to commend them as well because I do see them as my mentors and stuff like that. Like even though I'm a mentor at the, mentor partner at the intersection, I do see those two as my mentors, Dr. M and Dr. Barlow and stuff like that. Yeah, I just want to say, thank you for, opportunities and like fostering this environment and stuff like that. But anyway, before I get too gushy.
It's okay to get gushy. Oh, I think mentorship. Yeah, thanks for saying. I think that's very, very important. And I've had both for while you're in college and even afterwards. I've had a lot of different mentors. I remember when I was at Knoxville College, Mr. Carey was a mentor. I've had white mentors, white male mentors. One of my greatest mentors, and is why I'm here today, is Carol Harder. Dr. Harder was the first female president of UNLV and the longest tenured president to date. And talking about connections and networking, Dr. Harder hired me at Ohio University again, I'm dating myself, in 1980. And she was not president then. She was in a similar role. Her title was something like Vice President for Administration and Dean of Students. And she was actually the one that encouraged me to get my PhD, because I think I told you originally I wanted to be a psychologist. I wanted to be a clinical psychologist. Even after I went to Ohio University as a director, I still hadn't kind of overtly said, okay, I'm going to stay in, continue a career in higher education. And I remember Dr. Harder saying, if you are going to stay in higher ed, you need to go ahead and get your doctorate. You know, she said it's your union card if you want to advance, because higher education is so degree conscious. And so I guess it was at that time that I said, okay, I guess I'm going to continue a career in higher education. And so I continued to work full time and work on my doctorate as well, and completed my degree there. So Dr. Harder then left Ohio in 1988, I think, and took her first presidency in SUNY Geneseo, a liberal arts college in upstate New York, part of the State University of New York system. And she tried to recruit me there. And I remember saying, I said, I don't want to go to another small town, because Ohio University is in Athens, Ohio, very small kind of rural town. And I said, I certainly don't want to go to any place that's going to be colder than here, because where she was like right near Rochester, New York, which is like cold. Even though I grew up in a cold climate, I had enough of that. In Ohio, where I was in southern southeastern Ohio, and it could get a little chilly there. Anyway, long story short, we stayed in touch with each other. And I would, talk to her sometimes about issues, and we would talk. And then when she took her presidency here at UNLV, so that would have been her second presidency. We actually, the first year she was here, I actually came out as a consultant in financial aid, because there were some issues that needed to be addressed. And then subsequent to that, a year later, she recruited me for my first position here at UNLV was Dean of Enrollment Management. That was the first, they had created that position. And then after that, moved up, and I've done several different other administrative roles before my current role. And I've been in my current role for about 10, 11 years. Now, I've been here at UNLV for 26 years. I can't believe I've been here that long. But it's been a great experience. But my point with all of that was, the mentoring and that connection, and your mentor doesn't always necessarily be your boss. It just turned out. And to this day, Dr. Harder is retired now, living in San Diego, and we're still very good friends. And I keep in touch with her.
Yeah, I keep telling Dr. M and Dr. Barlow, like, if I take off, they're coming with me. Like, my people. But I do want to talk to you about your graduate school experience. Like, what was being a first generation student in graduate school like?
I don't know. By that time, I think, well, again, both for my master's and my doctorate, I worked full time. I was a full time employee, and then went to school part time. And so I think for me, I'm not sure if it was because I was first generation. It was more, and at that time when I was at University of Tennessee, Knoxville, I didn't have any children. But when I went to Ohio, as my son, my only natural, I have two stepsons, my natural son was born in Athens. And to be honest with you, so I don't know if it was an issue of first generation, but I remember thinking, when my husband and I were married for 10 years before my son was born, and it was like I was 32, and it was really a thing was, well, am I gonna have a baby, or am I gonna work on my doctorate? Because I didn't think I could balance the two. And as they said, the old proverbial body clock was ticking. So I said, well, I guess I'm 30. If I'm gonna have a baby, I might as well do that. Anyway, so I did that, and then I wanted to wait until he was my son Patrick was old enough. So I actually started my doctoral work when he was 5 years old. So I'm not sure, to your question, that it was because I was first generation as much as, like I said, just balancing being a first time mother, and going to school at the same time.
Do you have any advice for any first generation students that are in graduate school right now? Like, I know it's been like a really difficult semester. Do you have any advice for them?
Just to stay connected, to develop relationships with, not only with fellow students, because I think that's a good support too. To have other, because when I was my doctor, I went with a cohort, together, and that, and those were people who from very different kind of backgrounds, in terms of professional backgrounds, but they also had life balance too. So it's always able to have other people that can kind of um, relate to, if not experience, but at least relate to the same kind of challenges and things that you're going through. So I would say my advice to graduate students, as it would be for undergraduate, but also for graduate students, is to establish some good friendships and people that you can have each other's back and support each other, but also know your faculty members, and particularly, I mean, that's important in undergraduate, but particularly in graduate school, it's important to know your faculty, for them to know you, and whoever stay connected with your advisors, and things like that. I think would be my advice.
So speaking of faculty, you are faculty at UNLV. So what are like the best and worst parts of being faculty at UNLV from like your lens?
The best of work, I guess, it depends on the day, or maybe it depends on the hour. I don't know. So when I first came to UNLV, my first 2 years, actually, I'm an administrative faculty member. But when I first came to UNLV, I actually taught for 2 years master level courses in the College of Education, which I really enjoyed a lot. I just like engage talking, but also engaging in kind of hearing about other people's students' experience and things like that. But then as I took on more administrative responsibilities, I didn't have the time that I think I needed to devote to teaching. And so I didn't do that after that. I missed that, but I think I love being engaged with students, even though a lot of my work is administrative now. That's the only reason we're here. There's no other reason that this university or any university exists, unless it's just a total research university. The only reason we're here, not one of the reasons, the reason, is for students. And I just my favorite time of the year is commencement. I'm so thrilled that we are having an in-person commencement, and to see some students maybe when they're freshmen and see them develop, and it just I got chill bumps. And I still have people. I just have a few students even from back when I was at excuse me, Ohio University, that still keeps in touch with me. And I'll tell you a quick story talking about how what a small world it is. A student, a financial aid student at Ohio University. When I was there, I helped her. I came here. By the time I came here, she was an assistant professor. I won't name her, but she's an assistant professor, and she was just promoted to full professor. And this was a student I had back at Ohio University. And I remember when I saw the announcement that she was promoted to full professor, I said, "You've come a long way since financial aid." So that's what makes me get up in the morning. That's what, you know, I've thought about retiring some, but I don't think there's anything greater than I could do than to work with. And I mean, I have bad days, and I have, I joke and say my problem children, but that's what motivates me. And to talk with students like you.
So, what are like some lessons that you've learned on the faculty side of the fence, like some things that students wouldn't know about?
I would say, and I think some of this just comes with experience, you know, but just to not take yourself too seriously. I mean, I think you have to work hard, but not take yourself too seriously. I think it's important to have a sense of humor, also to have thick skin. I think is important because there's a lot of issues. And I think I've noticed that over time, and I don't want to group students, but I think today's students, or I don't know if it's today's students or the environment, are much more, they have high expectations of what they want out of an education and an experience on campus. And I think that's a good thing. Sometimes it's very challenging and difficult to deal with, but I think I'd rather have that than to have apathy. It was like, I don't care. And I've learned to listen and not always come to a situation, whether it's with a professional colleague or student, thinking I already know what the answer is, and to listen and say, maybe my perspective is not exactly right. I think where you stand depends on where you sit. And so I think people have different perspectives. People say, well, why can't they just do that? What you're talking about it. So why don't they see this? And I never say, well, you shouldn't feel that way, because I can't tell you how you feel. I can tell you what I meant by what I said or what I did, but I can't say, well, Karen, you shouldn't feel that way. Because if you feel that way, that's the way you feel. And so I've tried to say, why did Karen feel that way? Is it something I could have done differently? Is there some policy or some barrier? Because that's one of the things that I think we're looking at now as an administration, not just me, is are we creating barriers for students to be successful, whether it's a first gen student or whether it's a student of color? It doesn't matter. So we're looking at our policies and procedures to see, are we creating unnecessary barriers for people to be successful? And particularly for first generation, it's hard to navigate higher ed. I mean, to financial aid, I mean, that's a whole nother, I wouldn't even think now, I mean, that's part of my portfolio, but to say that I know financial aid now, no, I mean, because it's very complicated. And so it's very hard to maneuver, and particularly on a campus our size. And so I think we're trying. I mean, certainly there are things that need to be changed, but I think we're headed in the right direction in terms of looking at it really from the student's perspective, and are we providing the experience that students need to be successful. So I'm always interested to get feedback from students, even if it's negative, and I've learned over time not to become defensive and say, oh, no, I'm always right, because I'm not always right. And so
It's great advice, great advice. I'm like taking notes in my head. So like as a student myself, this was probably like one of the hardest academic years because of the pandemic. Do you have any advice for students going through I mean, there's some first generation students who have multi-generational families in their house. Like learning's not the same. So like, is there any advice that you have for students going through?
It's hard. Not it's hard for staff, faculty, and staff as well. I think in some instances, I think you don't realize how important that until this time. I mean, you know it, but you don't really realize how important that personal interaction is. And some people do very well remotely. I mean, even before the pandemic, we had a number of people. We have like five or six, maybe a few more online degree courses. We can get your entire degree online. And at the master's level, we have online programs that you can do. So there's some individuals that works with them. Maybe for whatever reason they may work, may have other issues. But I think for the majority of students, particularly undergraduate students and first generation students, I think being on campus and having that connection, even if they, are not living on campus, but to actually be on campus makes a difference. And so as we come back, I'm excited that for fall, we are expecting to be pretty much full time, the way we have been, prior to the pandemic, but also realizing that, to your point, that is going to be a transition for students who, for that year, even is difficult, but now you're coming back to this environment. I don't have the answer to how we deal with that exactly, but we're cognizant that that is an issue, that's an issue. And, I will say, there've been, and not just at UNLV, I think across the country, the more mental health issues, not just for college students, but for K through 12 as well. This has been a year like no other that I think most of us have ever experienced in our lifetime. And I think we're kind of coming on the other side of it. We're not there yet, but we're coming on the other side of it. But to your point, I do think we have to be conscious of students and staff as well making that transition back to campus and being tolerant. It's going to be a little bumpy probably at first for different reasons. And as you know, and doing one of the things that we as a system did during the pandemic was to allow for SU grades, satisfactory, unsatisfactory grades. But yeah, I think that there's going to be there's going to be an adjustment period, I think, for everybody, Karen. But I think it's going to be a great thing. I mean, I think it's going to, but it will be an adjustment, and I'm certainly looking forward to, and I hope students are looking forward to being back on campus.
I know I am. Even though like I love the, rolling out of bed and just turning on your phone when you're in class, I do love learning in person a lot more, and I know a lot of people can say the same. But speaking of coming in person and getting involved, like, how would you recommend someone to get involved right now, like with the pandemic and stuff, like get involved with their peers? Like, where would you send them?
Well, we've tried to, as best we could on campus, still offer things like through student activities and getting students involved in, registered student organizations. Clearly, it's not the same as, being on campus, but we've already done some of that. We've tried to provide, again, they're not the same and more limited services to students, whether it's counseling through CAPS or whether it's the health center and things like that. And like I said, student activities have tried to still offer something, but it's not the same. It's no way that we can say this. But I am proud of my student affairs colleagues. I think they've done as best we could do under the circumstances. And so I would just, hope that students, as they come back, that they won't be disenchanted and that they will get involved in activities and other things around campus. So I'm looking forward, we'll have, a lot of opportunities to have, different organizations when we first come to Welcome Week, so, and things like that, to encourage students to get involved and to get engaged. Because I think that's and it's a balance. I think, clearly, going to class and doing your academic work has to be a priority. but I also think the experience and getting involved in co-curricular. It used to be called when I first started out in higher education, we used to refer to anything outside of the classroom as extracurricular, and that changed so many years ago, thinking, no, it's not extra, it's part of that experience. And even now, employers, it's great to have whatever particular field you're in, to have that technical expertise. But now, and they refer to them as soft skills. I don't think I like a term that I think the career services is using now, and it's called, rather than soft skills, power skills. Those critical thinking, being able to work in a team together, because and that's what employers are looking for. I mean, certainly you have to have certain technical skills, but in terms of whatever particular job it is, they could teach you that. But the critical thinking and being able to work and deal with conflict. 'Cause I don't care what environment you're going to be in, there's going to always be some conflict. So to be able to deal with conflict resolution, to think critically, to listen, things like that. Those, I think, are the skills that are important. In addition to to the technical skills that you gain through college. And I think it's things like through co-curricular activities where that can happen in terms of leadership. If you're in an organization and you're either if you're the president of the organization or you're part of the group at all, you may not even realize it at the time, the skills that you're developing, in those organizations, but they will serve you very well after you finish and pursue your career. So I encourage students to get involved as much as they can in co-curricular activities.
Awesome. So before we go, do you have any like general advice or last words to um, like first generation students, faculty, staff, anyone want to talk to me?
I don't know. I would just say stay engaged. Um, and I know that we all have challenges. So particularly for students, I know it's not easy. And I know many students have other um, life issues other than going to school or being in college. But just hang in there, stay focused. Again, take advantage of the many resources that we have on campus. The intersection, the student affairs. We have many resources with student activities, student involvement. We have other services also in terms of other academic support. The colleges. We have advising centers in all of our colleges. We have the Academic Success Center. Take advantage of those resources. That's why they're there to help you. To help you get through, because we know it's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do. But I will say it's definitely worth it. Like I said, I'm a little kid from North New Jersey, and the only way I'm here today is because of I'm getting emotional. It's because of my education.
It's beautiful. I do want to ask you just one more question.
Sure.
Are there any projects you're working on that you'd like people to hear about? Any social medias you want to shout out? Any organizations like you want to put on? Anything like that?
Projects that well, one of the things I had mentioned earlier is we want to do I want to do an assessment, what's called a diversity audit, to look at all of our areas, to see again, are there barriers, are there things we need to do differently to remove barriers for students, or that not intentionally, but to see what things we can make easier for students to be able to navigate. So I would say that in particular. I can't think of any. I guess right now what we're working on is getting ready to come back in person and looking at kind of things we need to do to have support services in place for students and for staff as well. Many of our staff have been working remotely as well, and so it's going to be a transition for many staff and for faculty as well to come back. So I think that's probably my focus right now. And then also, unfortunately, our chief diversity officer has retired, and so I've taken on the interim role as chief diversity officer for a short period of time. So I'm focusing on that as well before we do a national search for that position. So it keeps me busy.
So I'd like to thank you. Thank you for getting interviewed by me. Thank you for answering all my questions like so openly and honestly. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome, and thank you. I enjoy speaking with you. So thanks for having me, and for all people who listen, particularly first generation students, hang in there, and it's worth it. Take advantage of all of the resources that are here on campus. And I look forward to seeing you at commencement when as you graduate. I'll tell you, that's my favorite time of the year. So thank you.
Awesome.
So thank you so much, Dr. Fain and Miss Keren. This has been a wonderful addition to our semester interviews. Your candidness and willingness to help us in this endeavor is so greatly appreciated. Your words of wisdom are always going to be with us. We have been recording as well, and we are on YouTube, so we'll be able to share this with individuals who weren't able to join us now, but we've had a lot of excitement about this interview. So thank you so much, Dr. Fain.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Marrero Lopez, and thank you for all that you do in the intersection. You're doing great things over there. And Keren is a perfect example of that. So, so thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.